idea of amending the motion in order to allow for several days of hearings. We can actually get some expert testimony. Having just exchanged with the bill's proponent, whom I respect and whom I thank for bringing it forward, I'm not clear on that the answers that she provided are necessarily legally accurate. I'm not saying that in a derisive way. It's just, it's impossible for one person to have all of the legal facts related to a very complicated piece of legislation. I certainly don't have all those facts. But, for example, I would like to know what happens to the claims of small business people who have done contractual work for a business, and then the business goes bankrupt, and then the small business whose employees are not covered by the priority listing in either this bill or in the existing bankruptcy and insolvency legislation would potentially be pushed further back still. I also I'm not clear yet on whether or not this bill would provide for companies to continue to issue collateral in order to get loans that are necessary to hire people in the first place. So I'd like to know more. I think the goal here we all share is to protect pensioners in the event of a bankruptcy, but to make sure that the bill actually does that and does not unfairly harm other players, small businesses, workers for those businesses, other pensions who've lent to the company that is going bankrupt, future workers who may not get hired if companies can't get financing. All of that stuff needs to be examined. And maybe when we examine it, we'll conclude that the bill is still optimal and it needs to be passed. But we can't make this kind of a rearrangement of our bankruptcy, insolvency, and creditor protection legislation without a single witness other than the person moving the bill. I've never seen something of this nature pass without a witness. It would be pretty revolutionary to do this without witness testimony, and I think unnecessarily so. I think everyone here is acting in goodwill to try and get hearings quick.
For a long time, and I hope that I think that as little was done as possible to make it look like the report had been responded to without any real change. No structural change, no legislative change, no outside the department, outside the Canadian Armed Forces reporting. Why does the Prime Minister refuse to put in place the Deschamps report and continue to fail women in the armed forces?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we agree that our institutions are not living up to the needs of those who have experienced misconduct, and that includes the military justice system. We've taken concrete actions to address this. We've named Lieutenant General Jenny Carignan as a Chief of Professional Conduct and Culture. We've named Maurice Fish to conduct the third independent review of the entire military justice system. And we also recently appointed Louise Arbour to conduct an independent review of the treatment of sexual misconduct. Mr. Speaker, these are just the first steps. We know that every woman or man who serves in the armed forces deserves to be properly supported, and we will ensure that.
L'honorable député de Richmond-Arthabasca.
Monsieur le Président, le Premier ministre.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister, the Minister of Justice, the Minister of Official Languages, the Minister of Innovation, and even the Minister of Heritage, after changing his position, all mentioned at one time or another that they were in favor of net neutrality. However, the definition of net neutrality is that it is a principle that should ensure equal treatment of all data flows on the internet. Mr. Speaker, can the Minister of Heritage explain how regulating social networks respects this concept?
Le ministre.
The Honourable Minister.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Et
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think there's a bit of confusion about the definition of net neutrality because that definition focuses on infrastructure, the way that people can access the internet. Bill C-10 does not impact this at all. All Bill C-10 attempts to do is to ensure that web giants pay their fair share and that our Canadian artists are more easily accessible on those platforms. The Honourable Member for Richmond Athabasca. Mr. Speaker, I invite the Minister to go check the dictionary. That's the definition I found in the dictionary. The Minister is trying to make us believe that he's for net neutrality or make sure that people don't understand what's going on with C-10. And yet, in an internal memo that was given to him by his own Deputy Minister, it clearly stated that the new Broadcasting Act could apply to training applications, game applications, and audiobooks. The reality is that the Minister is about to give the CRTC the power to regulate web-based applications. Why? The Honourable Minister. The Honourable Minister?
Petit problème technique, monsieur.
Yes, my apologies. I had a technical issue. I would like to confirm that once again, what we're going to do with Bill C-10 is ensure that web giants do their fair share. Bill C-10 will not apply to health applications or videos produced by individuals who've been very clear about this. The Department of Justice made a presentation to the Committee of Heritage where my honourable colleague was present and specified that there will be the Honourable Member for Richmond Athabasca. Mr. Speaker, memos from officials, experts, professors, artists, Canadian men and women are objecting to what the Minister is saying and are fighting against his desire to undermine freedom of speech. Canadians want the truth on the real intentions of the Canadian government. They want to give the CRTC more power to regulate what's going on the internet. What is the Minister waiting for to announce that social networks, web-based applications, and audiobooks will be clearly excluded from Bill C-10 with no ambiguity whatsoever? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to remind my honourable colleague that a petition from Quebec's Union of Artists, Adrienne Moffat, Claude Legault, all support Bill C-10, just as other artists in the rest of Canada. Lorena Mechanic, the former General Director of the CRTC, Pierre Trudeau, a professor of law. When it comes to individual activities, whether it be podcasts, training videos, personal videos, there will be no requirement about those videos when it comes to Bill C-10.
Member for Lethbridge.
Net neutrality is the principle that internet users should have equal access to all sites, all content, and all applications without being blocked or having preference given to certain sites over others. In 2017, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said he would defend net neutrality, and the previous Heritage Minister made net neutrality a foundational part of Canadian cultural policy. So why is it that the current Heritage Minister is now going against this principle by legislating that some content gets to be showcased and other content has to be downgraded in order to show favoritism to some artists over others?
Before going to the answer, I just want to remind the honourable members then when asking a question or speaking in the chamber and referring to another member, we refer to them by their writing or by their title and not by their proper name. And it's something, especially with questions, when we have a chance to write it ahead, we get a chance to think about it. I just want to remind everyone of that rule that exists in the chamber. The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I believe there's some misconception about the concept of net neutrality since it refers to the hardware, to Canadians and people being able to have access to the internet, and that these conditions be the same to all internet users. Bill C-10 is not about telecommunications or hardware, Mr. Speaker. It's about ensuring that web giants pay their fair share and that Canadians have easy access to the content developed by Canadian creator, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Lethbridge.
The minister reads his speaking notes very well, but what he's saying is actually really misleading toward the Canadian public and actually quite insulting to their intelligence. Net neutrality ensures that all internet users are treated fairly. The Liberals, they once believed this principle. Now, as stated, they'll say Bill C-10 has to do with web giants, but that's actually not the case. We're talking about a bill that targets everyday Canadians in their everyday internet use. We're talking about regulating the internet. Everything from YouTube to Facebook to TikTok, etc. It's unfair, it's undemocratic, and it's incredibly regressive.
Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, a profound misconception by the honourable member opposite. We're not regulating the internet, Mr. Speaker. We're regulating some activities on internet. There's a huge difference. Bill C-10 does not affect how internet service providers manage internet traffic and does not modify the relevant provision in the Telecommunications Act, therefore maintaining net neutrality, Mr. Speaker.
I want to remind Mr. Couric that interrupting, especially during question period, is not permitted. The honourable member for Lethbridge.
So basically what the minister is saying is, don't worry, folks, discrimination is okay as long as it's approved by the government. I'll do it right. No, the government cannot and should not be trusted to regulate what we access online. I'm talking about successful YouTubers like Simply Nailogical or Justin Bieber, who came up through YouTube, or Lily Singh, a famous YouTuber right now. I'm talking about individuals who are innovative, creative, and inspiring. They use these platforms in order to gain an audience and influence culture. So why are the Liberals so intent on picking winners and losers instead of letting Canadian artists continue?
The Honourable Minister.
Without government interference?
Thank you. Again, profound misconception about what we're trying to do. In fact, the Department of Justice has stated that there's no problem within free speech and C-10, and the member opposite was at the committee. She got to ask questions from the Minister of Justice himself regarding this. What we want to do, and frankly, what I can't understand is why does the Conservative Party of Canada continue to oppose the fact that we're asking some of the wealthiest companies in the world to pay their fair share when it comes to Canadian artists, Canadian musicians, Mr. Speaker. I just don't understand.
Mr. Speaker, everything is getting more expensive under this Liberal government. And now we have the proof. Last month, inflation powered through the government's target to a 10-year high. Lumber is more expensive. Houses are more expensive. Food is more expensive. Life is more expensive. How much more is this government's economic failure going to cost Canadian families?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, from the beginning of this pandemic, we made a simple promise to Canadians that we'd have your backs, however long it took, whatever it took. And that's exactly what we did by supporting Canadians right away who lost their jobs because of this pandemic with the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, by supporting small businesses across the country with things like the wage subsidy and the Canada Emergency Business Account. We have been there to support Canadians through this difficult time. And we've seen, Mr. Speaker, our economy bounce back quicker than other economies around the world because we've been there to support. We will continue to be.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
But, Mr. Speaker, this government is the first one in Canadian history to make it impossible for Canadians to aspire to home ownership. Inflation is making construction more expensive. Only the wealthiest first-time buyers will now qualify for a mortgage. And the government has been studying capital gains taxes on principal residences for years. Why is this government making it harder for Canadian families to get ahead?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, that's in fact not true. One of the very first things we did when we took office was raise taxes on the wealthiest 1% so we could lower them for the middle class. Then and Conservatives voted against it. Then we brought in the Canada Child Benefit that puts more money in Canadians' pockets every single month to help with the cost of raising their kids by not spending and by not sending checks to millionaire families like the Conservatives did. We've continued to invest in affordable housing and working towards a Canada-wise early learning and childcare system to lower the price of childcare to $10 a day in the coming years. We've continued to make life more affordable.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the economic news for Canadians went from bad to worse last week. The United States announced it wants to double tariffs on softwood lumber. That will impact mills in British Columbia, Northern Ontario, and the Saguenay. Canadian resource workers are once again being threatened by the United States. When are Canadians going to finally see this Prime Minister stand up for working Canadians?
The Prime Minister actually shut down committees and indeed all of Parliament for almost 2 months to stop them from answering those questions. He then began another 2-month filibuster to block questions. And today, when we came forward asking for Mr. Chen to come up and
stand up for Canadians faced with a difficult American administration under the last administration and under this administration, we will continue to stand up for Canadian jobs, for Canadian interests, and make sure we are protecting Canadian jobs every step of the way.
Don't forget to like, dislike, subscribe, and comment. Safe Space Cafe. And always, have a good